She sat at a table meant for 12 people, and every single chair around her was empty. Not because she wasn't invited, not because people didn't like her, but because the woman who quietly owned one of the most prestigious event venues on the East Coast had deliberately chosen a corner seat at her own sister's wedding reception and told not a single soul who she was. That's where this story begins. Not with the chandeliers, though they were magnificent. Not with the flowers, or the champagne, or the violinist playing something achingly beautiful near the ballroom doors. It begins with a woman named Serena Alderman sitting alone in a silver slip dress, her dark hair pinned up just slightly off-center, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching her younger sister become someone's wife, and trying very hard not to feel invisible. And then a man she had never seen before in her life pulled out the chair across from her, sat down without asking, and said 7 words that would quietly change everything. If you've ever felt like a stranger at an event you helped build, this one's for you. And if you're new to Crest Stories, welcome. Hit that subscribe button before this video is over, because stories like this one, we tell them every single week. Now let's go back to where it all started. Serena Alderman was 34 years old, and she had spent the better part of a decade making sure that other people's most important days went perfectly. That wasn't a metaphor. That was her actual job. The Alderman Grand, that's what people in Chesapeake, Maryland called it, though the full legal name on the deed was longer and less poetic, was a converted 19th century tobacco warehouse that Serena had spent 6 years turning into one of the most sought-after wedding and event venues on the mid-Atlantic coast. It had 16-foot exposed brick walls, it had 3 separate ballrooms, it had a kitchen staffed by people who had trained in cities where food was a religion, and it had a roof terrace that, on a clear summer evening, let you see all the way across the Chesapeake Bay to where the water turned the color of hammered copper at sunset. People flew in from out of state to get married there. People put themselves on a 2-year waiting list just for a Saturday booking. And Serena had built every bit of it from a piece of land her grandfather had left her in a will that most of her family had quietly assumed was worthless. Her grandfather, Harold Alderman, had been a quiet man with big, careful eyes and the kind of patience that only comes from watching things grow slowly over time. He'd owned the warehouse since the 1970s, when the tobacco industry in Maryland was already beginning its long, slow exhale. For decades, the building had just sat there, pigeons nesting in the rafters, local kids sneaking in through a busted side door, the city occasionally sending letters about code violations that Harold would read carefully and then set aside on the corner of his kitchen table. When he died, he left the land to Serena specifically, not to her mother. Not to her sister Brooke, who was 6 years younger and had always been the family's acknowledged favorite in the soft, unspoken way that second children sometimes are. He left it to Serena, along with a handwritten note that said simply, "You always saw what things could become. Don't let anyone talk you out of it." Her mother, Dottie, had cried at the reading of the will. Not from grief, exactly, more from the specific bewilderment of a woman who had never quite understood her oldest daughter. Why had Harold chosen Serena? Brooke was sweeter, Brooke was easier, Brooke had a way of making a room feel warmer just by walking into it. Serena was the one who organized things, the one who noticed what needed fixing before anyone else did, the one who stayed late and left early and said no to things that didn't make sense. What Dottie had never quite grasped was that those qualities, the noticing, the organizing, the willingness to see past what something was to what it could be, were exactly what Harold had been watching in Serena her entire life. And it was exactly those qualities that transformed a crumbling warehouse full of pigeon nests into the Alderman Grand. She hadn't done it alone. She would be the first to tell you that. She had a contractor named Bo Riggs who worked with her through 2 brutal winters and a collapsed ceiling incident that aged both of them by approximately 5 years. She had a business partner for the first 18 months, a woman named Sandra Pruitt, who had eventually bought out her share to open her own venue in Annapolis, which Serena had wished her well on genuinely and without bitterness. She had a head of operations named Victor Marsh, who had been with her since the very beginning and who ran the day-to-day with a precision that Serena trusted completely. But the vision had been hers, the risk had been hers. The years of sleeping on an air mattress in what was now the East Wing bridal suite, while she saved money and waited for permits and drove the city council half-mad with her detailed, documented, meticulously organized renovation proposals that had been hers. And now here she was, sitting at table 14 at her sister's wedding, inside the building she owned, and the only person in the room who knew that was Victor, who kept catching her eye from across the ballroom with an expression that said, "I know you told me not to come over, but I am watching you very carefully from a distance." She had made a decision, weeks ago, that she would not tell anyone at the wedding, not the guests, not Brooke's in-laws, not even Brooke's new husband Ryan, that she was the owner of the venue. She wanted one day, just one, where she was simply Serena, Brooke's sister, a guest, not a vendor, not a landlord, not the woman who held the lease on the night's magic. It had seemed like a reasonable thing to want. It had seemed, sitting in her apartment the week before the wedding, like a kind of quiet gift she was giving herself. What she hadn't anticipated was how lonely it would feel. But here's what you need to hold on to as this story unfolds. That loneliness? It was about to be interrupted in the most unexpected way, and the man who interrupted it had no idea, not even the faintest clue, that the woman he was walking toward had signed the contract for every chandelier above his head. His name was Patrick Keene, and he was the kind of man who looked more comfortable in a dress shirt rolled to the elbows than in the full suit he was currently wearing. He was tall, not dramatically so, but enough that he had a habit of tilting his head slightly when he was standing and talking to someone, as if he'd learned long ago to soften the height differential. He had dark hair that was starting to grow out past where it was probably supposed to be, and the kind of face that looked like it had laughed a lot and also weathered a few things it hadn't laughed about at all. He was 37. He was Ryan's college roommate, and he had driven 6 hours from Pittsburgh with his 7-year-old daughter, because Ryan was one of exactly 4 people in his life he would drive 6 hours for. His daughter's name was Isla. She was small for her age, with her father's dark eyes and a gap between her 2 front teeth that she was enormously proud of. She had fallen asleep in the car somewhere around the Pennsylvania border and woken up in Maryland in the kind of bewildered, slightly suspicious mood that 7-year-olds sometimes arrive in after unexpected naps. She was currently sitting beside her father at table 7, poking at a piece of wedding cake with a fork and looking at the room around her with the specific unblinking assessment of a child who is deciding whether or not to be impressed. She was impressed. She was just choosing not to show it yet. Patrick had noticed Serena about an hour into the reception. Not the way people notice someone in movies, not with a dramatic double take or a glass frozen halfway to the mouth. He'd noticed her the way you notice something that feels slightly off in a picture you're looking at. There was a full table sitting empty around her. She wasn't on her phone. She wasn't flagging down a waiter. She was just sitting there, watching the room with this expression that he couldn't quite name. Not sad, exactly. More like someone watching a film they've seen before from a distance alone. He had looked away. He had talked to Ryan's uncle for 11 minutes about bass fishing on the Potomac. He had cut Isla's cake into smaller pieces so she'd stop trying to eat it in one enormous forkful. And then he had looked back at table 14, and the woman in the Sibylfresh dress was still there, still alone, and something about that fact had settled into him like a splinter. Small, but undeniable. "Stay here and don't eat all the cake," he told Isla. "I won't," she said, immediately reaching for another piece. He crossed the ballroom floor slowly, not with the swagger of a man on a mission, more with the measured gait of someone who is still in the process of deciding whether this is a good idea. He passed the violinist. He passed a table full of people laughing loudly at something he didn't catch. He passed a waiter with a tray of champagne flutes and stopped for a moment, genuinely considering taking one for courage, then decided against it. He reached table 14. He pulled out the chair directly across from her, not beside her, which might have felt presumptuous, but across, which felt like it left her room. He sat down. She looked at him, and he said, "You look like you could use some company." Serena stared at him for a moment that lasted maybe 3 seconds, but felt longer. She had not been expecting that. She had been expecting to be left alone, which was what she had chosen. which meant she was expecting to be moderately unhappy about it in a quiet, dignified way for the rest of the evening. And now there was a stranger sitting across from her with an expression that was not pitying, not predatory, just open, like he'd asked a straightforward question and was genuinely curious about the answer. "I'm fine," she said. "I didn't ask if you were fine," he said. "I said you look like you could use company." She looked at him again. Subtle distinction. "I thought so too," he said, and extended his hand across the table. "Patrick Keene. I'm here with Ryan's side." She shook it. "Serena." Brooke sighed. "Ah." He glanced toward the dance floor where Brooke was currently being twirled by Ryan with the kind of unself-conscious joy that made Serena's chest feel complicated in ways she hadn't quite sorted out yet. "She's your sister?" "Younger sister. She looks happy." "She is happy," Serena said, and she meant it fully without any shadow underneath it. Brooke's happiness was not the complicated part. She's been in love with Ryan since they met at a vineyard in Sonoma 4 years ago. He proposed on a Tuesday morning in their apartment while they were both still in pajamas. She said it was the most romantic thing that had ever happened to her. Patrick smiled. It was the kind of smile that arrived slowly and stayed put. "I was there for the panic leading up to the proposal. Ryan called me from his car in a parking garage in Pittsburgh at 11 p.m. to read me his speech." "Was it good?" "It was terrible," Patrick said warmly. "But the intention behind it was perfect." That's what she said yes to. There was something in the way he said that, the intention behind it was perfect, that made Serena look at him a little differently. Not suspiciously, just more carefully. "What do you do in Pittsburgh?" she asked. "I build things," he said simply. "Residential construction, custom homes, mostly. I have a small crew and we take on maybe 8 or 10 projects a year." He paused. "What about you?" And here was the moment, the small fork in the road she'd built for herself. She could say, "I own this building." She could watch his expression shift. She could let the evening become what it always became when people found out. Slightly more formal, slightly more careful, a hair's width of glass appearing between them and her. Or she could just be Serena. "Hospitality," she said. "I work in hospitality." Which was true. Impeccably, technically true. "Do you like it?" She considered the question. Actually considered it the way it deserved to be considered. "I like what it makes possible," she said finally. "I like watching people have the best night of their lives inside a space that a team of people, worked very hard to make feel like it was built just for them." She paused. That part never gets old. He was watching her while she said it, and something in his expression told her he was filing that away, paying attention to it, letting it mean something. "That's a good answer," he said. "It's an honest one," she said. Across the room, Serena caught a brief flicker of movement near the service corridor. Victor, her operations director, appearing for just a moment at the doorway and scanning the ballroom with the particular focused expression that meant he was doing inventory of the room's status. His gaze found her, assessed that she was fine, and he disappeared back through the door without drawing attention to himself. She had trained him well. Patrick hadn't noticed. He was glancing back toward table 7, where Isla was now standing on her chair, not dangerously, just enough to get a better look at the chandelier directly above her, with her little face tipped back and her mouth slightly open. "Yours?" Serena asked. "Isla, 7 years old. She's been talking about the chandeliers since we pulled up." "They're original," Serena said before she could stop herself, then caught herself and said more carefully, "I mean, I've read about the history of this building. The light fixtures in the main ballroom are original 19th century. "She'd want to know that," Patrick said, and he was smiling again. "She collects facts about old things. She'll go home and tell her teacher that she stood under 19th century chandeliers at a wedding. Her teacher will spend 20 minutes trying to verify it." Serena laughed. It came out before she planned it. Genuine, a little surprised at itself. She hadn't laughed like that in longer than she could quickly calculate, and somewhere in that laugh, something shifted. Something small and structural, like when a door that's been stuck finally releases on its hinges. Not dramatic. Just open suddenly where it hadn't been before. Now here's what you need to understand about Serena Alderman before this story goes any further. Because if you don't understand this part, the rest of it won't make the kind of sense it should. Serena was not lonely in the way that people sometimes assume ambitious women are lonely. She was not secretly pining. She was not haunted by a past relationship that had ruined her. She had dated, intelligently and carefully, and she had ended things, also intelligently and carefully, when they stopped making sense. She had friends she loved, and a mother she called every Sunday, even when those calls were exhausting, and a sister who sent her voice memos instead of texts because Brooke said texting felt too flat for how much I have to say. But she had built her world so precisely around her work that the world and the work had become the same thing. The Alderman Grand was not just her business, it was her daily language. The way she measured time, the way she gauged success, the way she understood herself to matter. And the problem with being the person who makes everyone else's most important days perfect is that somewhere along the way, you can forget to leave room for your own. She had noticed this recently. Not with alarm. Serena was not prone to alarm, but with the quiet clarity of someone who had been looking at a blueprint for so long that she finally saw the load-bearing wall she'd forgotten to account for. She was sitting alone at her sister's wedding because she had made the work so total that she didn't know how to be a guest anymore. She didn't know how to just be somewhere without managing it. And the man across from her, with his terrible at the right things face and his daughter, standing on her chair and his 7 words that hadn't been a line, just an honest observation, was sitting with her in the space she'd accidentally made around herself, and not trying to fix it or explain it. He was just sitting there. That was rarer than it should have been. Stay with this story. Because what's coming, and it is coming, is the part that none of the people at table 14 that night saw arriving. Isla made her way over to table 14 at approximately 9:15, motivated by the twin engines of boredom and curiosity that power most 7-year-olds through the later hours of adult events. She arrived at the edge of the table and looked at Serena with the kind of unfiltered directness that children have, and adults spend their whole lives either learning to recapture or pretending they never lost. "Are you my dad's friend?" she asked. "I'm getting there," Serena said, which was the most honest answer she had. Isla appeared to find this acceptable. She climbed into the chair next to her father without asking. She had his self-possession at least, and looked at Serena's sparkling water. "Is that wine?" "Sparkling water. My dad drinks wine sometimes," Isla, Patrick said without any particular heat. "It's not a secret," Isla said. He said wine is for adults and sparkling water is for people who want to feel fancy without committing. She looked at Serena. "That's a quote." Serena looked at Patrick. "Is that a quote?" "Approximately," he said, and he had the decency to look slightly embarrassed about it. "He's funny," Isla said, as if issuing a formal verdict. "He's funnier than he looks." "I'm right here," Patrick said. "I know," Isla said. There was a quality to watching them together. The ease of it, the way they operated in orbit around each other with the specific gravity of two people who had been each other's whole world for long enough that they didn't have to explain that. Serena found herself paying close attention to. It wasn't performed. It wasn't the kind of warmth that people put on in public to show you something. It was just the real thing, unglamorous and entirely evident. She thought about asking about Isla's mother. She decided against it. Some doors you wait to be opened from the other side. Instead, she said to Isla, "Your dad says you like old things." Isla's eyes lit up with the particular intensity of someone who has just been correctly identified. "Old buildings especially," she said. "Because they have," she paused, assembling the words with care, "accumulated history. My teacher said that, accumulated history. Like the walls remember things." "The walls in this room," Serena said, and she couldn't entirely help herself, "are from 1887. Isla stared at her. "You're serious." "Completely." "How do you know?" Serena paused for exactly the right amount of time. "I did a lot of research on this building," she said. "It was originally a tobacco processing warehouse. They converted it over the years, but the original masonry in the main hall, that's this room, is the original structure. The brickwork in the north wall has markings in it from the workers who built it. Little initials, mostly. Some dates." Isla's mouth was open. "There are initials in the wall?" "In the mortar, yes. Around the corner from the main entrance, about 4 feet up. You'd need to know where to look." "Can we look?" Isla said, and she was already half standing. "Isla," Patrick started. After the dancing, Serena said, "I'll show you." Isla sat back down satisfied. Patrick looked at Serena with an expression she couldn't fully read. Something between gratitude and something more careful, more attentive, like he was revising something. After the dancing, he said, echoing her, and then, without particular preamble, "Does that mean you'll dance?" She had not said that. She had not implied that. She was fairly certain she had, technically only promised Isla a tour of brick markings. But the music had shifted, and the floor had filled, and Brooke was beckoning at her from across the room with the wild-eyed urgency of a bride who has been waiting for her older sister to stop sitting in the corner for approximately 45 minutes. And before Serena had finished deciding anything, she was on her feet. She was a good dancer. This surprised him. Not because he'd assumed anything, but because she'd had the quality all evening of someone holding something slightly in reserve, present, but with a careful distance between herself and full surrender to the moment. And then the music started, and that reserve just dissolved. She moved like someone who had danced a lot once and then stopped for a while and was now remembering it the way you remember something that lived in your body rather than your head. Not technically perfect. Better than that. Natural. He wasn't bad himself. He was the kind of dancer who felt the beat and committed to it honestly, which is all dancing really requires. They found a rhythm quickly. Brooke spotted them from across the floor and made a face at Serena that said 17 different things simultaneously, the way younger sisters are uniquely equipped to do. Serena ignored her, which she had years of practice doing. "She's staring at you," Patrick said. "She stares at everything. It's a gift. You two are close?" Serena considered it. We speak the same language," she said. "Even when we disagree about everything else." "That's probably the better definition." "That's a better definition than most people have for it," he said. "What about you?" "Siblings, older brother, Kevin. He lives in Denver and calls me every Sunday to complain about the altitude, which he has chosen freely and could stop choosing at any time." She laughed again, that same involuntary thing, the laugh that surprised her. "He sounds exhausting," she said. "He's my favorite person over 40, Patrick said, "after my dad, and possibly before." The song shifted. Neither of them moved off the floor. There was a brief shared awareness that they had both made that choice, and then a brief shared choice to not mention it. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask. Why were you sitting alone?" She looked at him. The question was direct, not unkind, just direct the way his first 7 words had been direct. Like he'd decided she deserved honesty in the asking. "I was thinking," she said, "for an hour and a half. I think slowly." "I don't believe that," he said, simply and without accusation. Not for a second. She held his gaze, he held hers. Around them the ballroom, her chandeliers, her brick walls with their 1887 initials, swirled with music and candlelight and the specific joy of 200 people watching 2 people become a family. "I didn't want to be anyone specific tonight," she said finally. "I just wanted to be here, just here, without a role." He didn't fill the silence after that with something reassuring or deflecting. He just nodded slowly, like he understood exactly what it cost to say it. "I think that's the most honest thing I've heard anyone say at a wedding," he said. She said nothing, but she didn't look away. And somewhere behind the service corridor, a walkie-talkie crackled, and Victor Marsh exhaled carefully and did not interrupt. Here is where this story starts to get interesting. And I mean that precisely, because up until now you might be thinking, okay, 2 people at a wedding, they're connecting, there's a kid with a gap-toothed smile, this is lovely. And it is lovely. But something is coming that neither Patrick nor the audience has quite prepared for yet, and it's already in motion. At 9:47 p.m., a pipe fitting in the East Wing utility corridor, the one that Bo Riggs had flagged in the inspection report 18 months ago, and that Serena had scheduled for replacement in the winter when the venue had a gap in bookings, decided that it had held together long enough, not catastrophically, not dramatically, but enough that water began moving through walls it wasn't supposed to move through, and enough that Victor Marsh's earpiece lit up with a whispered, urgent message from Sandra, the night operations lead, saying 4 words that are never good to hear at 9:47 p.m. during an active wedding reception. "We have a situation." Victor appeared in the ballroom doorway. He scanned the floor. He found Serena, not difficult, because he had been tracking her all evening with the practiced discretion of a man who understood that his job was to solve problems before they became his employer's problem. He caught her eye. He did not wave because waving would draw attention. He simply looked at her and then looked slightly toward the east corridor. Serena saw it. She read it completely. She leaned toward Patrick. "Excuse me for a moment," she said. "Of course," he said. She walked off the floor with the specific unhurried pace of someone who does not want to be followed, which is a pace most people can't quite manage in moments of actual urgency. She crossed the ballroom perimeter, passed two servers without making eye contact in the wrong way, and reached Victor at the service door in approximately 45 seconds. "East Wing utility," Victor said quietly. "Pipe fitting. Sandra's contained it, but there's water in the hallway near the bridal prep suite. No guests have seen it. No damage to the event space. The Harrigan anniversary party is booked in the East Wing at noon tomorrow," Serena said. "Not a question. Correct. Call Bo tonight. I don't care what time it is." "Already done," Victor said. "He's sending a crew at 6 a.m. Serena looked at him. "Good." She looked toward the ballroom. 200 people eating cake. Her sister spinning slowly in the arms of the man she loved. Chandeliers throwing light like scattered gold across brick walls that were older than anyone in the room. "Anything else?" she said. "Champagne tower is looking unstable on table 2, Victor said. "Tell Stephen to take it apart before the best man notices it." "Already done," Victor said again. She looked at him. "What would I do without you?" "Significantly more plumbing," he said, and disappeared back through the door. She stood there for exactly 3 seconds, alone in the service corridor with the distant sound of music and the closer sound of her own breathing, and she thought, this is what it means to own a thing. It never stops. Not even tonight, not even once. And then she smoothed the front of her silver dress, lifted her chin, and walked back into the ballroom. Patrick was at the edge of the dance floor with Isla, who had found a second slice of cake from somewhere, and was eating it with the focused satisfaction of someone who has successfully outmaneuvered adult supervision. He looked up when Serena came back. He read her face with a speed that surprised her. "Everything okay?" he said. "Everything's fine," she said, which was also true. He looked at her for 1 beat longer than the sentence required. Then he nodded. He didn't ask again. She noticed that. At 10:15, Brooke cornered Serena near the champagne table. Victor had successfully dismantled the tower by then, with Stephen handling it so smoothly that no one had noticed, and grabbed her by the wrist with the gentle urgency that had been her primary negotiating tactic since she was 8 years old. "Who is he?" Brooke demanded. "Patrick Keene, Ryan's college roommate. I know who he is. I mean, who is he to you? I've been watching you two for an hour and a half. We just met tonight." "Serena." Brooke looked at her with the particular expression that younger sisters reserve for moments when they believe the older one is deliberately being difficult. "You laughed. People laugh. You laughed. You specifically. You who I watched sit at this table for 40 minutes by yourself looking like a woman auditing a budget. You laughed like a person." Serena opened her mouth, closed it. "He doesn't know, does he?" Brooke said. It wasn't quite a question. "Know what?" Brooke gestured broadly at the room, the building, the chandeliers, the 1887 brick walls, all of it. "No," Serena said. Brooke studied her sister for a long moment. She was 28 years old, and she had spent her entire life reading Serena the way you learn to read a language that doesn't translate directly. You don't get it word by word. You get it by feeling the whole thing at once. "Are you going to tell him?" she asked. Serena said nothing. "Serena, it's a wedding," Serena said. "It's one evening." "It doesn't have to be," Brooke said quietly. Not as a push, just as a fact. There was a beat of something between them, warm, complicated, entirely sisterly. And then Ryan appeared at Brooke's shoulder and said, "There you are. I've been looking everywhere." And Brooke was pulled back into her evening, trailing her fingers along Serena's wrist as she went, the way she'd done since they were small. Serena stood at the champagne table alone for a moment. Across the room, Isla was showing Patrick something on her fingers, counting off facts with enormous solemnity. He was nodding, matching her solemnity entirely, giving her the same consideration you'd give a peer. Serena watched them. Something in her chest, quiet and structural, shifted again. At 10:30, she showed Isla the initials. Patrick came with them, of course. Not invited, not uninvited, just naturally included in the orbit of following his daughter through a wedding venue at 10:30, while a woman he'd met 3 hours ago led them both through a side corridor toward the main entrance. The lights in that part of the building were lower in the evenings, warm and amber, set deliberately to create an atmospheric transition between the entrance and the main event space. Serena knew the hallway the way she knew her own kitchen. She knew exactly where to turn, exactly where to stop, and exactly how to angle herself beside the north wall so that the ambient light caught the brickwork at the right degree. 4 feet up, she said to Isla. About 2 feet from the corner. Isla went immediately to the wall, pressed her small face close to the brick, and then made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. I see one, she breathed. H and then a JHJ, and below it, to the right, Serena said, a date, 1888. Isla's voice had gone reverential. 1888. 1 year after the building went up, Serena said. Someone came back and added their mark. Isla straightened up and looked at Serena with an expression of absolute seriousness. This is the best thing I've ever seen at a wedding, she announced. High praise, Patrick said. It's deserved, Serena said, and she meant it. Isla went back to examining the wall. Patrick moved to stand beside Serena, close enough that she was aware of the proximity, not close enough to be anything but coincidental. You know this building well, he said. It was quiet. Conversational in texture, but not casual in intent. I told you, she said. I did a lot of research. You told Victor which server to speak to, he said. About the champagne thing. She went very still. You didn't think I noticed, he said. She looked at him. I wasn't sure what I was noticing, he said carefully. I'm still not sure. But the way you moved when you went through that door earlier, that wasn't a guest. That was someone who knows where all the doors are. Silence. Isla was oblivious, pressing her fingers into the mortar between the bricks, with the absorption of a future archaeologist. Serena looked at him for a long moment. She had options. She could deflect again. She was good at deflecting. She had built a very particular architecture of deflection over the years, smooth and functional and nearly invisible. But he wasn't asking accusingly. He wasn't asking to expose her. He was asking with the same directness he'd brought to everything else. The chair he'd pulled out, the question about the dancing, the way he'd held her gaze on the floor. He was just asking because he actually wanted to know. If I tell you something, she said quietly, I need you to not make it into a bigger thing than it is. For tonight. He waited. This building is mine, she said. I own it. I built it. I've been here as a guest tonight because I wanted one evening where that didn't define the conversation. He said nothing. The hospitality thing wasn't a lie, she added. It was just abbreviated. Still nothing. She braced herself for the recalibration she'd seen before, the slight shifting of his frame, the way people tend to reorganize their understanding of someone when a fact like that lands. He turned to look at the wall, at the brickwork, at the amber light and the 1887 masonry and his daughter's small fingers, tracing initials left by a man named H.J., who had stood in this exact corridor in 1888 and wanted to leave something of himself behind. It's a beautiful building, he said. His voice was exactly the same as it had been. She stared at him. That's it? That's what you have to say? I also think, he said, that your grandfather was right about what you could see. She had not told him about her grandfather. She had not told him about the will, or the note, or the words you always saw what things could become. She had not told him any of it. She looked at him sharply. Brooke told Ryan, Patrick said, and there was the faintest warmth in it, the very edge of a smile. Ryan told me. Before the wedding. He said his new sister-in-law had turned a condemned warehouse into one of the most beautiful rooms in Maryland, and that I should be very respectful of her taste in chandeliers. Serena stood in that corridor for a moment. She felt, and this is specific, this matters, she felt the particular sensation of being seen not despite the thing she'd built, but through it. Not in spite of it, not around it. Through it, the way light moves through a material it was made for. You knew, she said. For about 30 seconds after I sat down, I suspected, he said. When you talked about hospitality, the way you said it. He paused. I decided it didn't matter. I wanted to know who you were, not what you owned. She was quiet. Dad, Isla called from the wall, I found another one. There's a number. I think it's a measurement. What kind of measurement? Patrick called back. I don't know. A bricklayer kind of measurement. Let's document it, Patrick said, pulling out his phone. And then to Serena quietly. Can I ask one more thing? You can ask. Why didn't you want anyone to know? She considered it. The real answer, the one she hadn't quite said yet even to herself. Because when people know, she said, they stop looking at me and start looking at what I built. And what I built is extraordinary. She paused. But I am not only what I built. He looked at her with those dark, weathered eyes. No, he said, you're really not. They stayed in that corridor for a long time. Longer than made practical sense for a wedding reception. Isla documented 6 sets of initials and 2 dates. She named the imaginary bricklayer H.J. Henry James, because that felt, she said, like a name someone in 1888 would have. Patrick didn't mention that Henry James was also a famous author from 1888, because Isla's logic was impeccable, and the correction would have missed the point. Eventually, Serena's phone buzzed. She had it on silent, but she felt the vibration, and she glanced down to see Victor's name. She showed Patrick the screen without commentary, and he gave a small nod. Go, he said. There's a minor pipe issue in the East Wing, she said. It's already handled. Victor just wants to walk me through the morning repair schedule. On your sister's wedding night, he said. It's the nature of the thing, she said. He looked at her steadily. I know what that's like, he said. Having something that never fully switches off. Kevin, my brother, calls it owning instead of working. When you own a thing, it owns you a little bit back. Your construction business, she said. I built my first house when I was 26 years old, he said. Took me 14 months because I had no idea what I was doing and I had to research everything. But when I handed the keys to the family who bought it, he paused. That was it. I never wanted to do anything else. She looked at him. Isla was born during the 3rd project, he said, answering the question she hadn't asked. Her mother and I, we were better as people apart than we were together. We figured that out too slowly, which is the usual way. He said it without bitterness, without self-pity, with the flat honesty of someone who has processed a thing all the way through and arrived on the other side of it. Isla lives with me full-time, has since she was 3. She's remarkable, Serena said. And she meant that specifically, not in the general way people mean it about children. She's the clearest thinking person I know, he said, which is humbling since she's 7. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at it. Victor, when you're ready. No rush. I have to go walk a utility corridor, she said. On my sister's wedding night, while wearing a silver dress. The glamour of ownership, he said. She laughed. That 3rd laugh, the one that was becoming its own small tradition. I'll be 20 minutes, she said. Isla can show me the rest of the initials, he said. We'll be here. She started to go. Then she stopped. Patrick. He looked up. When I come back, she said, will you ask me to dance again? He held her gaze. I was never going to stop asking, he said. She was 19 minutes, technically. The East Wing situation was exactly as Victor had said, contained, manageable, Bo confirmed at 6 a.m. Sandra had run it flawlessly. The crew would be invisible tomorrow. The Harrigan anniversary party would proceed without interruption, and the guests would drink their champagne and cut their cake and make their toasts inside walls that were telling none of their secrets. Which was, Serena thought as she walked back through the service corridor toward the sound of the music, exactly as it should be. The best hospitality, her grandfather had once said to her. Not about hotels, he'd said it about his own house, about the way he received people into it. The best hospitality is when the person you're welcoming never has to think about how you made it feel that way. It just feels that way. The magic is in the invisibility of the effort. She had carried that with her through every renovation decision, every staffing hire, every near miss with a collapsed ceiling or an unstable champagne tower. The effort should be invisible. The welcome should be effortless. But right now, walking back through a side-eye door into a ballroom full of candlelight and late evening joy, she thought that maybe she had applied her grandfather's hospitality principle a little too broadly. Maybe she had made herself too invisible. Maybe she had gotten so good at effortless that she had accidentally made herself disappear. She emerged into the main event space just as the band shifted to something slower. Patrick and Isla were at the edge of the dance floor. Isla had Serena spotted before her father did, and she pointed with one definitive finger. Patrick turned. He looked at her the way he'd been looking at her all evening, steady, uncomplicated, without the glass that usually appeared between her and other people when they found out what she'd built. He crossed the floor, stood in front of her. "The pipe's handled," he said. "The pipe is handled. Building still standing?" As of 1887 and counting, he offered his hand, not with drama, not with performance. Just the open, unhurried gesture of a man who had said what he meant to say and was waiting for her to decide. She took it. They moved back onto the floor. The band was playing something that moved like water, slow and certain, with a rhythm underneath it that you felt more than you heard. Around them, Brooke and Ryan danced with their foreheads almost touching. Aunts and uncles and college friends found their partners. Isla found her way to a table nearby and sat swinging her legs, watching the room with those dark eyes, occasionally glancing at her father and the woman beside him with an expression that was ancient and knowing in the way only children can be. "Can I ask you something?" Serena said. "You can ask," he said, echoing her. "When you sat down at my table tonight, was it a plan? Did you think it through?" He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, just honest. "I thought about it for about 60 seconds, he said. "And then I thought, the worst that happens is she tells me to leave, and then I'll know. The best that happens is," he paused. "Well, I didn't have a specific picture of the best. I just knew the alternative was not going over, and that felt worse." "You went toward the uncertain thing," she said. "I always do," he said. "It's a construction habit. You can plan a build down to the fraction of an inch, and there will still be something the ground throws at you that you didn't account for. If you get scared of uncertainty, you never build anything." She listened to that land. "What did you account for?" she said. "When you planned this evening?" He smiled, that slow, staying smile. "I accounted for a wedding," he said. "I accounted for Isla eating too much cake. I accounted for Ryan making a speech that would embarrass himself mildly and charm everyone anyway." He paused. "I did not account for you." "Is that good or bad?" she asked. "It's the best kind of thing a day can do," he said. "Surprise you with something you didn't know to plan for." She looked at him, really looked at him, the way you don't do to people at weddings, the way you don't do to strangers, the way you do only when you decide, quietly and without announcement, that someone is no longer exactly a stranger. "I'm going to be in Pittsburgh in 6 weeks," she said. It came out before she decided to say it. "We have a client looking at venues in the area. I'm doing a site visit." He absorbed that. "Pittsburgh's a good city," he said carefully. "I've never been." "You'll like the bridges," he said. "It has more Brenna's bridges per square mile than any city in the country. Isla told me that. It's probably true." "I'll be there 3 days," she said. "Tuesday through Thursday. I know some good places to eat," he said. "And Isla would never forgive me if I didn't show you the old steel mill they turned into an art museum. An old industrial building repurposed into something beautiful," she said. "Seems like something you'd appreciate." She laughed again, the 4th one. She'd stopped counting after the 3rd, which meant it was working. "Is this you asking me to dinner?" she said. "This is me suggesting Pittsburgh has a lot of redeeming qualities," he said, straight-faced. "The interpretation is yours." "I interpret it as dinner," she said. "That works too," he said. The reception wound down the way good receptions do, slowly, reluctantly, the way you leave a warm place on a cold night. Not all at once, but in increments, couples drifting toward the coat check, the band shifting from dance music to something quieter and atmospheric. Tables clearing by degrees, the flowers remaining longest because no one quite wants to be the one to take them away. Brooke found Serena near the entrance at 11:45, holding her heels in one hand and looking out through the original 19th century arched windows at the parking lot and the dark water of the bay beyond it. "Happy?" Brooke said. She didn't mean in general. She meant tonight, specifically. Serena considered it, really considered it the way she considered things. "Yes," she said, which was also the simplest thing she'd said all night. Brooke put her head on her sister's shoulder for a moment. They stood there, just the two of them, the way they'd stood together at the window of their childhood bedroom 20 years ago, watching summer storms roll in from the coast. "Grandpa would have loved tonight," Brooke said. "He would have loved the brick wall detail, Serena said. Brooke laughed. He would have found the initials within 5 minutes and named all of them. He would have named them after baseball players, Serena said. HJ was Hank Jones, Brooke agreed solemnly. Obviously. They stood quietly for another moment. He knew, Brooke said. About what you'd do with it, he always knew. Serena looked at the reflection of the chandeliers in the dark window glass. 16-foot brick walls and original iron fixtures, and a man in 1888 who had pressed his initials into mortar and not known that 136 years later, a 7-year-old girl with a gap in her teeth would press her fingers there and say his name out loud. I know he knew, she said. Patrick appeared in the entrance hall behind them, Isla asleep against his shoulder with the complete surrender of a child who has officially run out of evening. Her little face was slack and peaceful, one hand fisted loosely in the lapel of his jacket. He looked at Serena over Isla's sleeping head. She looked back. Brooke, with the wisdom of a woman who knows when to absent herself, murmured something about finding Ryan and dissolved toward the main ballroom. Patrick moved to stand beside Serena at the window. She made it to 11:30, he said quietly, nodding at Isla. That's a record. She earned it, Serena said. She documented 6 sets of initials and named a Victorian bricklayer. Henry James, Patrick said. Henry James, Serena agreed. They stood in the amber-lit entrance hall, the old building settling quietly around them the way old buildings do. That specific, barely audible exhale of materials that have been holding the weight of an event and are now releasing it. She knew that sound. She loved that sound. It meant the night had been what it was supposed to be. Thank you, Patrick said, for tonight, for the initials, for letting us interrupt your corner. You didn't interrupt it, she said. You fixed it. He looked at her. I'd gotten very good, she said carefully, at making myself invisible inside my own building. That's a particular kind of lonely. You made it stop. He was quiet for a moment. 7 words, he said. 7 words, she said. They worked? They worked, she said. Isla stirred slightly against his shoulder, made a small sound, and then subsided back into sleep with the absolute trust of a child who knows perfectly well that she is held. Serena reached out and gently tucked a strand of Isla's dark hair back from her face. It was a small gesture. It wasn't planned. Her hand was there before she'd thought about it. Patrick watched her do it, and something in his face, in the careful, experienced, already been surprised Einsteinite face of a man who builds things from the ground up and knows what solid ground feels like. Something in his face went very, very still, in the best possible way. Tuesday through Thursday, he said, in Pittsburgh. Tuesday through Thursday, she said. I'll find the best bridge, he said. Find the second best one, she said. Save the best for the third day, he smiled. That slow, staying smile, the one she'd been watching all evening, the one that she could admit this now, at least to herself. She was already thinking about the way you think about something you want to see again. The third day, he said. I can work with that. She walked them to their car at midnight, which was not something she had planned to do, and which Victor observed from the entrance with the expression of a man who has watched his employer do a great many things over 6 years and is now watching her do something new. It was warm for early September. The kind of night that still held the memory of summer but had the edges of fall pressing in around it. Cooler air coming off the water, the smell of salt and the slight sweetness of the flowering shrubs along the venue's front path, which she had selected herself from a nursery in Annapolis and which bloomed through September like a small, stubborn argument against the turning season. Isla had been transferred to the back seat with the practiced ease of a father who has done this handoff many times, buckled in with her face turned toward the window, still fully asleep. Patrick stood at the driver's side door. 6 weeks is a while, he said. It's not that long, she said. It's longer than tonight, he said. Tonight was longer than most things, she said honestly. He looked at her in the parking lot light, the old building rising behind her building, her vision, her grandfather's trust made physical and real and permanent in brick and iron and 19th century mortar. And she thought, this is the moment. This is the exact moment. Not the dancing, not the initials, not even the 7 words. This moment in a parking lot, with the bay a dark line in the distance and a sleeping child in the back seat. This is where the night actually was. Serena Alderman, he said, like he was setting the name down somewhere he intended to come back to. Patrick Keene, she said. Tuesday, he said. I'll text you the schedule, she said. Don't text me a schedule, he said, with feeling. Just text me when your plane lands. She laughed. 5, she'd stopped counting. Okay, she said. When my plane lands. He got in the car. He rolled down the window. The building is extraordinary, he said, but you were right. She waited. You are not only what you built, he said. The window went up. The car pulled out of the lot slowly, considerate of the sleeping child in the back. The taillights went red at the exit, paused, and then turned onto the road, heading north. Serena stood in the parking lot for a moment. The building behind her held its ancient, patient breath. Then she turned and went back inside. Because there was a plumbing schedule to confirm for 6 a.m., and Victor was waiting, and the flowers needed to be handled for storage, and the East Wing walkthrough wasn't going to do itself. And also because this was her building. This was her night's work, still unfinished in the best way. The kind of work that deserved to be finished well, with attention, with care, with the love of a person who understood that the best hospitality is invisible, that what you give people is an experience so complete they never have to think about the effort underneath it. She found Victor at the operations desk. He looked up when she came in. Everything good, he said. Everything's good, she said. He looked at her. He had known her for 6 years. He read the room, as he always did, with perfect accuracy. The gentleman with the daughter, he said. Pittsburgh, she said. He nodded slowly. Pittsburgh, he said, as if placing a pin on a map. 6 weeks, she said. You'll want the Thursdays cleared, he said, just in case. She looked at him. I said Tuesday through Thursday. Thursdays have a way of becoming Fridays, he said mildly. She almost argued. She didn't. Clear the Thursdays, she said. She did text him when her plane landed. 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning in October, when the Pittsburgh sky was the particular gray-blue of fall and the bridges, and there were so many bridges, Isla had been correct, rose out of the river mist like something out of a steel and dream city that someone had invented on purpose. He was waiting in the arrivals lane with a coffee cup in each hand and Isla in the back seat, who had informed him that morning, with great conviction, that she would not be going to school on Tuesday because her father had told her the site visit was important and she wanted to see what an important site visit looked like. He had not technically said that, but he had also not corrected it. Serena got into the passenger seat. She accepted the coffee. She turned to find Isla, watching her from the back with those dark, unsettlingly perceptive eyes. Did you find more initials? Isla asked. At other buildings? I always look now, Serena said. You started that. Isla appeared satisfied with this. Patrick pulled out of the arrivals lane into the city. The bridges came into view one by one, spanning the rivers with the kind of confidence that only things built to last can manage. He told her the name of each one. She looked at each one. Isla corrected him twice, factually, and was right both times. On Thursday, the third day, the one Serena had asked him to save the best bridge for, they stood on a pedestrian walkway high above the Allegheny with the city spread below them in the specific gold of a late October afternoon, and he said something that she had not planned for and had not accounted for and that landed, as true things do, with the absolute authority of something that was always going to be said. He said, I think I was looking for you for longer than one evening. She looked at the river below them, the light on the water. The city her grandfather had never visited but whose name she now thought she would remember for a very long time. She thought about a man in 1888, pressing his initials into mortar, not knowing who would find them. She thought about 7 words that had crossed a ballroom floor and reached a woman who had been making herself invisible. She thought about her grandfather's handwriting, patient and careful, on a piece of paper. You always saw what things could become. And she thought, yes, that's exactly it. You look at something, and you see not what it is but what it could become, and you decide, without permission, without guarantee, with nothing but your own willingness to build toward the uncertain thing, that you're going to trust what you see. I think you found me, she said finally, at the right table. Table 14, he said. Table 14, she said. He was looking at her. She was looking at the river. And then she turned, and she looked at him, and the whole complicated, constructed, beautiful, load-bearing architecture of the life she had built for herself shifted slightly. Not collapsing, not breaking, but adjusting. The way a building does when something new is added to it that changes the load and makes it stronger. The bridge is beautiful, she said. I told you to save it for the third day, he said. You were right, she said. He smiled, and she smiled. And somewhere in Chesapeake, Maryland, inside a building that had been standing since 1887 and would be standing long after anyone currently alive had set their last stone, Victor Marsh cleared the following Thursday from his employer's calendar, and the old brick walls, which had been standing through all of it, through tobacco and conversion and renovation and near collapse and chandeliers and dancing and sparkling water and a 7-year-old girl's careful fingers, held everything as they always had, quietly, invisibly, the way the best things do. If this story moved you at all, if you felt something in that corridor or on that dance floor, or standing at the window while a car pulled away, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Stories like this one exist because of you. Subscribe to Crest Stories. Leave a comment below telling us what part got you. Because there's always another story. There's always another table 14. And someone, somewhere, is always about to pull out a chair.